Welcome to The Alignment Show, featuring conversations with folks who have taken steps to identify their highest values and align their lives around them. Time on this earth is not unlimited, and you may be seeking to make sure you spend your time on things that matter to you. These conversations will encourage you and support you in doing so. Now, let's meet this week's guest on The Alignment Show. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Once again, welcome to The Alignment Show. My name is Don King. I will be your host, and I'm looking forward to today's conversation. Before we get started with that, I want to remind folks that Medium Well, the second book in the Sparklight Chronicles, is now out there in the world. We've had it up on pre-order for a while. Went live on the major retailer this morning, and it's lagging a little bit in some of the other retailers, but that should be available soon. So paperback, hardback, ebook. You can find out more by going to donking.com/mediumwell. The journey from believing to believing in. And speaking of believing in, we have a fantastic guest with us this morning. Hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. You know, as I frequently say, like running a starship here sometimes. In any case, I am very glad to have with us this morning another author, but he's not here because he's an author. He is here because of what he has learned about dealing with life. He just such an amazing story that we have with Wulf Moon. I just love the name, quite honestly, and that's not a made-up name. That is his name. Wulf, let me give you a little bit of background here. He believes in born writers, but to succeed as a professional writer, you got to master both the technical craft of writing and the art of storytelling to create quality product that attracts savvy readers and builds a loyal fan base. Now, that principle applies to a lot of things. You know, Michael Jordan would not have been the basketball player that he was had it not been for him training his natural talent. Wulf has that, and he now works with other people to help them to achieve that. I've just got to go ahead and mention this. He made his first professional sale in Science World at the age of 15 after he won the National Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. If you're not familiar with those awards, understandable, but we understand that Stephen King and Joyce Carol Oates, folks like that, won that when they were in high school. That's how they got started. He has won major international contests, over 40 in writing. He is an award-winning author and speaker. And so we're going to learn how he not only became such an effective writer, but the main thing here is he learned to identify his strengths, to develop those strengths, and to hold on to that in the face of discouragement and barriers. I mean, he faced incredible barriers in order to get where he is. So we're going to have a recorded interview. Wulf was not able to be with us live, but this is a great conversation that I think is going to help you on your journey. So let's go ahead and bring on Wulf Moon. So as I just introduced, our guest this week is Wulf Moon. I told you a little bit about him, and we're very glad to have Wulf on here today. What I may or may not have said in the introduction, because frankly, folks, we're recording this a couple of weeks ahead of time. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to say, but I probably told you that I learned about Wulf by listening to Mark Leslie Lefebvre's podcast. Couldn't think of the word there for a second, Wulf. And his podcast was Stark Reflections. And when I heard Wulf's story, now, I love what he does as a writer, but as you all know, this is not just a writer's podcast. This is about living your values and valuing your life. And when I heard Wulf's story, I thought we have got to have him on here to talk about how he got to where he is. Now, we want to talk about his latest book along the way, but let's go ahead and dig into just a little quick background, Wulf. In the introduction, I said something about your books and about the contest that you won, Writers of the Future. Am I saying that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and so there's been a little bit of background here already, but let's go ahead and dig into that a little bit more. What was it that led you to realize you are a storyteller, you are a writer? That's just key to who you are. When did that come to you?
Well, like all writers, pretty much as soon as I could pick up a crayon, I knew I was a writer. You
Yeah.
just start telling stories. Um, One thing that was really a surprise was when my parents divorced. My mom left us with our grandmother, and she's Native American Chippewa, and awesome. She was an awesome storyteller in that Native fashion. And every night beside the fire, this was kindergarten, first grade. I would sit there and ask her for a story, and she would weave these wonderful stories. And I learned all about stories as a little kid listening to her. The most important thing was the cliffhanger at the end. What happens next, Grandma? Time for bed. You'll have to find out tomorrow night. But that cliffhanger was there. And she knew how to keep you coming back for more, and was very skilled at that. And then as I got older, I was writing. Actually, my teacher recognized my talents in high school. And he went to the principal and set aside a class just for me. Every day I would go to this class. I was the only person in it. And I would write stories. And then he would correct them, edit and send it off to contests for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I won. I mean, I say I've won 50 writing contests in my writing career. I'm certain I won that many just in high school, including the biggest of all, Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. That's a national contest to all students in high schools, open to all students in the United States in high schools. And I won that. And then I sold my story to Science World, which is they had 500,000 print copies per issue. And that was a science fiction story. And I just kept winning things after that. And so then when I applied to colleges, which we'll talk a little bit about what happened there, a college actually wrote a full board scholarship for me because they wanted to recruit me to be at their college because I had so many successes as a kid. So anyway, that's the beginning of the story.
Do you feel like that it's almost sort of like a natural ability for storytelling, that it came about because of hearing the stories from your grandmother, right? Am I remembering that right?
Right, yeah.
I've got something going off over here. Sorry.
Yeah.
This is one of the joys of live, and although this is recorded, we're treating it like it's live.
Yeah.
So what I was starting to go into there, it's almost like you wrote well and then later figured out why that worked, as opposed to studying writing and saying, I understand this about plot structure and all that kind of stuff, and then writing.
Yeah, I absorbed it just naturally. And like I said, at a very impressionable age, I listened to all kinds of my grandma was a wonderful storyteller in the oral tradition, but she also wrote stories down too. So I absorbed all of that as a little kid. And so, yeah, it was naturally there. I believe in born storytellers, but still you have to hone your craft. So I wrote a lot. And like I said, a teacher actually made a class just for me so I could write every day inside of for an hour every day. So that helped me a lot in actually developing my skills and developing my voice, so that I could later go on. And yes, later on, I had to figure out why my stories worked, why they sold, and why some don't. And that discovery process has led me to where I'm at today.
Yeah, because as we're going to talk about your book in just a little bit, how to write a howling good story, you're sharing what you have learned with other people. And so you figured out almost reverse engineering, I'm thinking, because you had the success. We're talking about people who supported you, your grandmother and the teacher, which kudos to that teacher. I've got to be curious. Did the teacher ever know the impact that he had on you?
No, sadly, by the time, he knew then, and he saw
He knew
me
about the
in the
contest.
scholarships, and he actually took me to colleges where I'd won awards and went to the banquets with me. So that was all of this teacher, that he saw me, he believed in me, and he helped make these things happen, which was really important because at that point in my life, my father became more and more violent, and I actually had to run away from home to save my life and got placed in a foster home.
Yeah.
So though that teacher and writing those stories and winning those contests, that was the only way I felt I had any worth, is as I would win these awards. My dad had said so many terrible things about me and that I'd never make it as a writer, and always putting it down, that these things were like stepping stones for me to get some kind of worth in a really horrible situation. And it's really hard when you're a foster kid too, because you naturally get strength from a parent that loves you. And when you don't have that, it's very debilitating, internally, emotionally. It's very crushing. And so you can feel like you're not worth anything and that you have there's no reason for you to try to succeed, because you feel so worthless inside that you don't even have that energy to go and attempt that. So,
Yeah.
so these things all help me keep going. They're not the true way to get your worth. You need to find who you are within, and build from that. But these external things can at least help. They did tell me I was a writer. I couldn't have won so many awards and have been published quite wide. As a high school kid at 15 years old, I had a sale to a magazine with 500,000 copies per issue in Science World that I still haven't beaten to this day. So, but it tells you, okay, I won this. I can write. And what's interesting, people like Stephen King, Joyce Carol Oates, John Updike, Upton Sinclair, all these people won that Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, that big contest, when they were kids. And the thought that the contest really talks about is that it gave them the belief at a very young age that they could do this. And it's why they're successful today, because they had done it as a child. And it made them realize that this was possible for them. And that's always what you're fighting against, your own self thinking it's impossible, it's so far beyond you. And then being able to see that possibility through trials that actually go right for you, actually show you that, yes, that is a path that you can take to success.
Okay. There's a glimmer of hope there. It's still not an easy path. So I love your emphasis on, yes, there are born writers, but you still have to develop it. If Michael Jordan had never developed his basketball skills, he wouldn't be the basketball player that he was. So I don't want to, I know you don't want to glorify the difficult circumstances, and that's not the right word, but I can't help but think that coming through that pain has shaped you as a writer as well, has given flavor to your voice, maybe. How has that affected your ongoing writing, your ongoing life?
Yeah. So, well, I still had a big crash that happened first. I had gotten involved in drugs and didn't care about my life, and finally ended up in a hospital because you take risks that you never should take, but you don't care whether you live or die. But that actually woke me up, and it made me realize, I actually thought about my name in the paper as an obituary from dying of a drug overdose. And I thought, I don't want that to be my story. And
Yeah.
I saw it very clearly, that I had come that close to that being the story of my life, and nobody knowing all the things that were in me. And it really troubled me. So that was my first step to stepping out. I had to sign away those scholarships I told you about. I had a full work grant, scholarships, room and board, the whole works, to a private college. I signed that all away so I could get away from the people that were pulling me into drugs. And so I walked away from all of that. I spent the next 10 years helping people break free from their addictions. I've spent thousands of hours in volunteer work, helping people, homeless people, people with addictions, and just trying, and even helping people, just because I'd won so many awards in speaking too, about as many as in writing. I even taught a class every week to help people improve their speaking abilities, to help them be successful in their lives. And so I did all that for free, just as my way to help other people in society. But after about 10 years of that, I found myself, and I'd start many businesses to keep us supported, because I have a back injury, so I've got to be real careful. I can't lift anything over 10 pounds. So anyway, I found myself standing in our walk-in closet, crying, because I didn't want my wife to hear me crying. And I was crying because I knew I wasn't being true to who I was. Because even with doing all these good things for others, it didn't change the fact that I still wasn't living my truth within. And so I wasn't happy because I know there's this gift in me that was meant to be shared with others, and I wasn't using it. And it was a terrible feeling. It was a terrible conclusion I had to come to, but the right one. And so I went and came out of the closet, wiped away the tears, and talked to my wife. And I said, Jules, I said, I want to go back to writing again. I feel like I can handle and control all of that now, because music, writing, drugs, it was all tied together for me, all that creative exploration, riding to the edge of things. So it might be hard for people to understand, but I destroyed all of my trophies when I left the hospital. I destroyed all of my writing. I had to totally shut that off to make sure I'd burn my bridges behind me. It wouldn't go back to something that scared me very deeply. So after 10 years, I felt like I could control it now. My wife said, I think you can. I'm scared, because she knew my history. But she said, yeah, go for it. And so that's what happened. I began writing again, and fulfilling that need within me to be true to who I am.
Yeah, yeah. I can relate to that. I started working at a newspaper when I was 14 years old, and regular listeners have heard me tell, although that's been over 50 years ago, I hit a point about a decade ago when it felt like the well had gone dry. And it was like 10 years before I could come back to it. So for you, was it sort of like, I almost want to say, coming back to a home that you never had? Does that make sense?
It was more like, I understand what you're saying. For me, it was more like the dam was going to burst whether I would let it or not, because I had held it back for so long. And I had so much creative power wanting to come out that it was killing me. It was like, okay, I have to let this go, and I have to find a safe way to release this. And that was writing. So that's what it was for me. The cool thing, and this is the interesting thing, people say when the disciple is ready, the teacher will appear, Don. Also add one thing to that. The disciple must be present for the teacher to appear. They must be seen for the teacher to appear. So you can't just say, well, why isn't this happening for me? You actually have to be proactive, just like you are with characters in your stories, and go forth to make your destiny. You can't just wait for it to come to you. And so that's the point where it's at, is I actually was writing again. And then my wife was watching a local television. We were in Eugene, Oregon at the time. And they announced that the Nebula Awards, which is the science fiction Oscars, that was being held in our town in Eugene, Oregon. And so she said, why don't you go to that? You'll meet other writers, and you can figure out your path. And so I said, okay. So just curiously, it was in our town right at this point where I was saying, I have to write again. I must write. And it was like a couple weeks later, this all happened. And I went to the awards, and the very first person that was behind the desk was Dean Wesley Smith, one of the most prolific writers alive today. Dean Wesley Smith said, you're from Eugene? I said, yeah. He said, how come I've never met you? I said, because I'm just getting writing again. And he said, do you have any pro sales? And I said, well, I had these sales back when I was in high school. And he asked about the Scholastic one, and he goes, you're a published writer, because I told him how much I was paid. And he goes, you're a published writer. And for the rest of the convention, he introduced, have you met Wulf Moon? He's a published writer. Have you met Wulf Moon? He's a published writer. And I mean, these were my icons, like Tim Powers, Gene Wolfe, all these very famous writers that I'd read. And here I was being introduced to them like I was somebody special. And I was totally red-faced by the end of that conference. But in the end, I realized this was really important to Dean, and that I'd had this sale when I was a kid. I didn't think that much of it, but he thought it was so important. He was introducing me to all these famous writers, and I realized, well, that must have been special. It must not be easy to get a professional sale. And it really changed my thinking. It helped me to value what I had done in the past. Instead of saying, it was a long time ago, it was like, well, it's still valued to this professional writer that actually was strong enough to bring the Nebula Awards to Eugene, Oregon. And it helped me to appreciate that, yeah, that I could, if I'd done this when I was a kid, I could do this as an adult. And then shortly after that, I won a bunch more contests, and I was published. I won the Star Trek Strange New Worlds contest. See if I got that here. Star Trek.
Yay! All right, yeah.
I'm actually in the Star Trek canon with my story Seventh Heaven, a board
cool.
story. What could be sweeter? And it just kept going from there. Everything didn't go rosy, but that was where I made my first Phoenix moment, rising from the ashes.
Mm-hmm. You know, it occurs to me, and by the way, I am reading how to the Howling Good Story. I'm drawing a blank on the exact title.
How to write a howling good story.
How to write a howling good story. Yes, I'm reading through that right now, and one of the things that strikes me, you've got a couple of really unique insights into what we might call classic story structure. I'm sure this has occurred to you about how, in a very real way, your life is almost an example of this classic story structure. It leads me to ask, for example, or what would you consider to be your? Can I say the two things without giving something away here, without spoilers?
Go ahead. No, you're
okay.
Fine.
So what would you consider to be your magic sword, for example? And we'll have to explain that concept, but you know what would that be?
Yeah. So magic sword is a teaching of mine that once the opposing force, the inciting incident happens, a character realizes they don't have the power to go beat their adversary, or else they would have done it then. And so they try to figure out a plan to get something of power that could beat that adversary. And that's almost always the case. There's something out there that they know of or heard of, or there's some mentor that could show them the way, that will lead them to this thing of power that will help them to defeat their enemy. And that can even be innate power within us that we just don't understand how to use yet. And so that was the case for me. I had this power. Like I said, I believe in born writers. I believe it's in you, but then you have to do something with it to hone the edge. So a dull sword is not going to be very effective in a battle. But if you can figure out how to sharpen it, you could save your life and maybe the life of others. So that's for me was my magic sword. That thing of power was actually being proactive about honing my abilities. And I can tell you the exact moment where I actually made a very proactive move that changed my history.
Yes. Fascinating. Go ahead.
Okay. So I've always been trying to make my money so that I could write full time. That was always the goal, is writing my actually novels full time. And so I've always had my own businesses, because I mentioned I can't work for others because of my back. So I've had to think up my own businesses. And every time they would get to the point where I'd just about be there, we would lose it all. And the last time I built everything up and the recession struck, I had a massive 800,000 lawsuit I was fighting. My wife, we lost our waterfront. I was just there. I had fought for all these things, and I lost everything. 2008, 2009, the Great Recession, totally wiped out. And then my wife had cancer, so we had to leave the islands. We couldn't live there anymore to support ourselves. I ended up in subsidized housing. My wife had cancer. I just brought her back from a nuclear treatment where I couldn't be within 8 feet of her. And for a week, I couldn't be within 8 feet of her, because she was that radioactive. And so I was looking at her life. I didn't have work, and what am I going to do? And I just thought, well, you know what? Let's reverse the process. I got nothing more to lose. So let's start by writing full time and focusing on what I really want to do, and worry about the money, as it comes, however that might work out. And so that's what I did. And then I asked the question, now, what will help me achieve that goal? So this is being proactive in your own journey. And so I knew, well, a lot of my friends, including Dean Wesley Smith, Chris Rush, Nina Creaky Hoffman, all these people that I met in Eugene, Oregon at a writing workshop I was in there, I knew they'd all gotten their start winning this contest called Writers of the Future. Now, Writers of the Future has been around for 40 years. It's the largest talent search for aspiring speculative fiction writers in the world. Thousands enter every quarter. And if you win, they fly out to Hollywood. You have a big gala that's just like the Oscars. You win substantial prize money, even $5,000 if you're the grand prize winner. And you get published in their book, L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future. So this contest actually has brought us some of the most powerful writers that we have today. So anyway, I recognize, okay, I need to win this contest. How will I win it? I will write a fresh story every quarter. And that's what I decided to do. And from that point on, it took me 4 years. And I also decided to write outside of my comfort zone. So whatever would be challenging for me, what I normally didn't write in, that's what I wrote in. So I wrote science fiction, I wrote fantasy, I wrote historical fantasy, I wrote finally a YA story, young adult story, and that's the story that won for me. And I wrote that in about 1 day.
Wow.
And that was my winner. And I wrote that story, but it took me 4 years of every quarter. Now, the cool thing, every time I entered, there was only one time that I entered that I didn't get a certificate of honorable mention, silver honorable mention, or semifinalist. So I knew I was hitting the target. I just needed to get my one bullseye. That's all I needed. And so I just kept firing away, knowing, well, everyone else has to go through this process. I have to too. So, so I just viewed it as, all right, eventually I'm going to find something that's going to hit that bullseye. If I just keep on it, I'm narrowing it down. And that's what finally happened. Now, that day I wrote that story, my wife was still recovering from cancer. And I asked her, it was the last day of the contest year, of the contest quarter contest year. And I said, Jules, I said, could you take care of yourself for 1 day? Would that be okay? And I could write a story and get it into the contest. She said, yeah. So great. So I was going to meet my goal. So goals are important, and sticking with those goals are important. And so I did my research. I said, now what should I write about? And she said, well, you wrote this story about that moon girl, Dixie. You know, you'd started something, and I do this exercise, and you'll read about in the book. It's called KYD, Kill Your Darlings. And I do this exercise where I write 250 words on a certain thing. And then I use those as story seeds. And she said, well, whatever happened to that moon girl? I want to know that's what happened to her. I said, okay, I'll write that. So I called it Super Duper Moon Girl and the Amazing Moon Dawdler. And I wrote this story about a disabled girl on the moon and her life support robo-dog that came into great danger protecting her. And I did 1,000 words that afternoon. And the next day, because I was doing research then too, and then the next day I wrote 5,000 words. At 11:15, I finished the story. And at just before midnight, and the contest was ending, I had to get it in time. Handed it to my wife. I said, I haven't eaten all day. Can you read this and see if it's even coherent? I'd never read through it. And she read through it. I came back in. It was 11:45, and she was just bawling. And I said, why are I just started laughing. And she said, why are you laughing? I'm crying. And I said, because it worked. And I grabbed it from her, and I got it in 11:56, entered it into the portal 11:56.
Oh, wow.
Corrected a few typos she had marked, and that was all I had time for. And that was my winner. So the moral of that story is, never give up, never surrender. And I mean, that whole time I was writing, I had to shut off in my mind, are you going to make it to the destination of your ending, which I saw vividly, like I was right there. And I just had to keep shutting that off. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. And I made it. And it became my winner in that contest. And that opened up a whole bunch of doors for me, because of the people know when you win that, you worked hard.
Oh, yeah. In a way, it makes me think about there was a kind of hippie classic book back in the 1970s. The name of it was Das Energie, which is a German word for the energy. And there's a little story within that about somebody walking through a forest, falling in a pit. They walk around for a little bit, hollering for help. Nobody hears them. They sit down and beat themselves up for falling in the pit. They holler some more, pace around. Eventually, they take their socks and their underwear and their belts and make a rope and climb out. And way too many of us think that all of that was wasted except for the making the rope part.
Yeah.
Whereas part of this book's point was it was all part of the process of getting out of the pit. So in a way, it took you one day to write that story. In a way, it took you 4 years. In another way, it took you a lifetime.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good
Wow.
point. And then in tradition of what I like to do, I recognized I was actually the moderator of their forum in Writers of the Future. And so I had a whole bunch of people. Well, I wasn't then when I won, but there were a bunch of people in the trenches with me trying to figure out how to win too. And I realized, well, normally everybody, once they win that, they use that platform to go off and launch their career, which is why you're trying to win it, because that's all the publicity helps so much. You get a lot of attention from that. It's a big contest. Like I said, it's international and everybody's trying to win it. So I decided, well, you know what? I don't feel good about that. I now know something that they don't know, and I know how I got here. And so I turned around and I wrote this thing I made a thread inside of the forum called Wulf Moon Super Secrets and Workshop. And I said, anybody willing to write a fresh story every quarter can join my workshop. And so a bunch of people signed up for it. I said, if you do, I will edit your manuscripts and help you to figure out how to make your stories into winners. And in the last 5 years since I started that, we've had from my workshop, from my group, the Wolfpack Writers, we've had 12, actually over 12, but at 12 that I can actually say won the contest through following the Super Secrets. And this is the hardest contest in the world for emerging writers to win. And they've all come out of my group. But there's now 870,000 posts or views to that. There's 5,000 some posts that I've made and people have made commenting on it, actually exploring how do you make a story that works. And what was cool is because I was helping all these emerging writers, I kept seeing, as I was editing their manuscripts, recurring things. The same things were recurring. And as I thought about it, I realized, oh, I used to make that mistake. I don't make that anymore because I've been writing for so long. But I used to do that. And look, it's across the board. I better write a super secret to help everybody see this so they can stop doing it. And that's where the super secrets came from. And as they did it, within the right at the end of the first year, we had our first winner in the contest. And then other ones began winning and selling to other markets, professional markets, some of the largest markets out there, and actually launching full professional careers. And all because I stopped and said, let me help you guys. So it's a weird, it was what happened. It actually kept me from writing my novels, but it did allow me to write a couple of books. I made my workbook first based on the Super Secrets. Then I got jobs with a couple of magazines now, writing articles for them. And then I compiled them all into this book. And it actually has changed our life financially because I was helping all these people for free for so long. And they succeeded so well, everybody started looking at it and they go, do you have a book on that? How can I get this information? Because they didn't want to go through 5,000 posts to figure out how to do this system. So anyway, so that's where the Super Secrets came from, and this book came from, was actually helping other people.
It reminds me of the grandfather of the motivational speaking industry in a lot of ways was Zig Ziglar. Yeah, and Zig, so you know who I'm talking about here. So Zig used to say you can get anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. Yeah. And what a great example of that. We want to be sure that people know about the book and all that sort of thing. So for folks who are listening audio only, we're going to say these websites out loud. But for folks who are on with us on video, I want to share a couple of websites here on the screen. So let's see which one first. Let me pull up your Patreon, because that's the heart of a community here. So Wolfpack Writers, and we will share the link for that in the show notes. If you go on Patreon, though, and just look for Wulf Moon, it's spelled WULF MOON. And I think that's probably sufficient to find it on Patreon. But as I said, we'll have it linked here in a bit. And we'll also have a QR code for you here in just a second. But for right now, let's look at the other sites. This is Wulf's own website, and we're on the tab for the Super Secrets of Writing books. And so this tells a bit about it. There is the cover. And there's a lot of material here from folks of various walks of life. I mean, the insights here are good for writers, but it's also we've got teachers that are talking about it, and others. There's life principles here, Wulf, and then the book itself. This is a resource that that I use, the books2read.com link. So you can go to books to read, that's the number 2, books2read.com/howling good story. Because you are published wide, it's not limited to just one retailer. We've got ebooks, we've got paperbacks, we've got hardcover. Just about any way that you want to get it, you can get this great information and training, mentoring from Wulf Moon. Now, again, those of you on here with us with video, it may be easier for you to get a QR code. So here is a QR code that takes you to that books to read link. We're calling it just where to find the book. Okay. Pause, 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 so people can get their cameras out and scan that. And then we're also going to show the Patreon, because there's a lot of great information right here in the Patreon.
Yeah, free information. You can sign up for free if you'd like.
Exactly.
And you know, I try to do posts for everybody, just like I did, like I said, for all those years inside of the forum that were free, that anybody can access. But here they're more composed and not just part of a class. They're actually like blog pieces. So, but then if you want to go deeper, then there's different levels of membership, including membership into my own writing group, Wolfpack Writers. And that's where I'm there every day helping the writers, and they know it. If they have any writing question, if they have a question on contracts, if they have a question on how to dress at cons, we just had a bunch of them go to their first conventions. These were unpublished writers that were now sitting because of the challenges I'd given them with 4, 5, 8 books out on their tables selling at a convention. And you talk about a proud papa moment.
I'll bet, yeah.
And I mean, it's so hard to get your first sale for most writers, and here they were in all these books that I'd challenged them. Here, let's go after this, and and use the super secrets to write our stories. And
proud papa moment. That really speaks to the feeling right there. The dress code, even that's something that'll make people nervous, and it's changed since the pandemic, from what I hear. I've not been to conferences, but I hear that things have changed a bit. So having somebody to mentor, that's just really key. And then here's another QR code. This one takes you straight to the Super Secrets site, to where you can learn more about the book. So lots of different ways that you can get at this material. Oh my, Moon, there's so much that I would like to dig into and ask. I feel like there's more to the life story. We are starting to come to the end of our time here, though, and so I always like to ask a guest, there's probably something that you wish that I had asked that I didn't. What would that question be, and what would your answer to it be?
Well, all right. So personally, purely selfish, was I wanted to say my book, it was actually on Amazon a #1 new release before it was released, and then it sat there for a month on #1 new release, and we're 4 months out now since it was published, and it's been on the bestseller list there on Smashwords. Drafted Digital is actually listed it 6 times as their top 25 all nonfiction books that they publish. 6 times in the last 4 months that I've been on that list as in the top 25 of all nonfiction, not just writing books. So it's been wildly successful, and all I can, and the Kickstarter I did for it did $21,000. So I'm super happy about that, because it actually pulled us up out of, remember I said we lost everything.
Yeah.
This helping others actually pulled us up out of all that. It's really weird, but actually sacrificing to help others actually in time turned around to actually lift us up out of abject poverty. And all of the workshops that sold through that Kickstarter, how the book's been doing, it's just turned our life around. And I'm really, really thankful for all the people that rewarded me for helping them. So that's my personal selfish thing. And now to help others, the thing that I encourage people to do, find people that will be positive in your life and will feed that positivity, because there's so much negativity trying to move forward. As in your apprenticeship as a writer, it's like I said, I've had lots of businesses. There's nothing that has a startup like trying to be a writer, a professional writer. There's no other business is so hard to advance into and to establish yourself to the point where your writing will actually pay your life expenses. So I'm at that point now, which I always tried to get there through making money first in my businesses. And it actually turned out to be the exact opposite. Start from the ground up and head that way when you have nothing to lose. Now, sometimes we have a lot to lose, so we just can't do that. We've got family and kids. I'm not saying, like I had a wife that was very sick, and I had to make sure we had insurance or we'd be in debt for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you have to look at your circumstances. But when circumstances, when all those storms start to even out, or you get towards retirement, or you have some windfall somewhere, well, then realign your course, head towards your dream. Just that's really what it takes, and get people around you that will say, yes, go for it. We're here for you. So that when those rejections come in, and they will, because you're not writing at a professional level yet, and you just have to face that. That's why you're getting rejected. Not always, but when you're brand new, for sure. So you just, if you can get some people that say, we believe in you, keep going. Those people are the voices you need to hear while you're going through that painful startup, or as they say, challenging startup. But it is painful. When you get a rejection, you work really hard on something, you put your heart and soul into it. It can rip you apart when you get that rejection, especially in the beginning. So you have to find ways to deal with it. And writers that don't quit, or worse, they might end up taking their own lives. And that's happened to writers. So we really need to have positive voices around us, and get people that aren't going to be helping us and saying that you'll never make it. You can't have those people in your life. You have to find a way to silence them. Tell them to knock it off. If that doesn't work, find a way to distance yourself from them. Unfortunately, with family, that can be very difficult to do. So, but you have to find a way to do that, because it is hard enough just continuing to believe in yourself when rejections keep pouring in. And it's not because you don't have the writing gift inside of you. It's because you haven't honed your talent yet. That sword isn't sharp enough yet to go to battle with. But when it is, it's going to cut through the lines, and it's going to put you forward. So keep focusing on that. Get a group around you that will build you up like that. That's why I developed my Wolfpack writers. We're all positive. If somebody isn't, I talk with them. And if that doesn't work, then I ask them to leave. So that you need other voices besides your echo chamber in your own, because you're usually alone writing in your office. And then when a rejection comes in, there's not a lot to air it out. So you got to have people that you can talk to where you're not venting at editors in the publishing industry, but that can help you keep a level head as you're going through it. Hey, it's your apprenticeship. At least they wrote personally back to you, so that's a good sign. I always have to tell people about that. Editors don't have time to do that, and so when they do, you are doing things right. These are signposts that you want to look for. Or entering Writers of the Future or other contests, if you even get an honorable mention back, that means you did something important, or they wouldn't have taken the time to give you that. So that's the thing, I guess I would say to everybody: find those positive people in your life, keep them close, and give back to them just as they're giving back to you. And we all have something, because we've lived through life and lived through trials. We all have something that actually is ahead of the path of somebody else. We just don't know who that person is. But if we can reach back with the knowledge we have, like me, I wasn't a New York Times best-selling writer, but I just won one of the biggest contests for aspiring writers in the world. And I said, oh, I've got knowledge. Why don't I use this to help the people behind me instead of leaving them in the ditch? And I helped a whole bunch of them make careers. And then when I did my Kickstarter, they were all there for me. And it got this great launch to it that propelled it up to being a very successful Kickstarter. So being good to others, they'll be good to you. That's, to me, one of the most important things of life. Not looking for anything back, just being good because it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your thoughts along those lines make me think to ask this follow-up question. If your life were a plot, and we've already talked about this to some degree, I get the sense this is not the closing chapter. You know how in a series there's a resolution, yes, but then there is more to come. What is your sense of what's next for you now that you've come out of the abject poverty, you've had this success? Uh, Life tends not to be a straight line even at that point, you know. So what feels like is coming next, do you think?
Uh, Very good question. And it feels like this head of steam behind me. I'm busier and busier than I've ever been before, and I'm trying to keep up with it. But still, so yeah, I'm working writing, which is my love. But my truest form of that writing is writing. I love fantasy. I love science fiction, but I really love fantasy because you can go anywhere with it and explore the furthest. You know, you can ride beyond the edge of imagination and show people worlds that they've never seen before. And so I have a couple of novels that are 80,000 words, 60,000 words. And I actually am talking to a big publisher in 2 weeks from now. Actually, she's the president of the company. And we've set up that appointment. And I have another thing with Audible Originals that I have a good lead on, good positive things happening there. So, part of it has been, do I permit myself to allow these good things to happen for me? And part of it has just been the current. I've had this huge current, and I've actually had to say, okay, I had my wife say, you know, you need to focus on, it's great you've helped all these other people, but you did all this so that you could advance your career. And she said, and you do have a responsibility to take care of me, which is true. Yeah. So I've been, the Patreon is only a few months old. It's been doing wonderfully. The book, of course, has just been released 4 months ago. So changing my workshop around, so I'm not doing everything for free anymore. That's been a big transition. So, but all these things are giving me the financial security I need to say, okay, now I'm taking care of my responsibilities. I can do this, and I won't go in the hole if I go finish my novel. And I have a place, very likely I could sell it to, or I can self-publish. So, which I already have done that with nonfiction with Mark Leslie Lefebvre's company, Stark Publishing Solutions. So there's all kinds of good things there. I just have to focus on now, what do I really want? Now that I've got myself back to that spot I wanted to be, where I didn't have to worry so much about paying the bills every month. So that's where I'm at right now.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Wolf, I've been looking forward to this conversation. It has been delightful. You never know when the universe is going to bring people together, because, you know, we had not met each other before, and this is a conversation close to my heart. Thank you for sharing your story with our audience here at the Alignment Show. And at this point, I will thank you once again and then turn it over to my virtual self to close things out. So, Wolf, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Oh, wow. Wow. This episode has run long, but it was just such a great conversation. And I hope that you found it encouraging. Again, this is not just about being a writer. This is about identifying your strengths. Sticking with it, as he said, keep firing away. It's important to have goals, but there's also, as he emphasized so much, about the importance of community and support. I mean, how important it was that teacher believed in him enough to set up a special class for him. And then Dean Wesley Smith, who's a great influence in the writing community, to take him around and introduce him and encourage him, help him to see his own experience in a different way. The thing that ultimately strikes me is how Wulf kept planting seeds. You never know which seeds will come up. You don't know what the crop will be. He is the essence of what Bob Berg and John David Mann would call a go-giver. It's not the opposite of a go-getter. Wulf is obviously a go-getter also. He's just not a go-taker. He put serving first, and he is now benefiting from that. So that's a great lesson for all of us. I hope that you have indeed found this to be a useful episode. We'll mention once again, to me, there's a tie in with my new book here. The subtitle of it is The Journey from Believing to Believing In. I saw a lot of what was so important to Wulf and his ultimate success was that he learned to believe in himself. Other people believed in him, and then he believed in himself. How wonderful that is. So next week, and I seem to do this a lot of weeks, I forget until we're closing this thing out that I need to take a look at the calendar and verify who is going to be our guest next week. So let's pull that up real quick. Oh, yes, I'm looking forward to this one as well. We're going to have Angelique Lyles will be on next week. Angelique is a business consultant, which, you say that and it doesn't sound real exciting with the label. She's just so much more than that. She's one of those people who evidences living your values and valuing your life, and she's helping other people to do that effectively. And so this is another one where we have recorded the conversation ahead of time, so I know how great the information is that's coming up. So be sure to tune in next week, same time, same channel. Started to say Bat Channel. I'll date myself, I guess. We are always looking to have conversations that are significant to help you to live your values and value your life. So we hope that you will join us again once again next week on The Alignment Show. That's it for this week's episode of The Alignment Show. What has it inspired you to do in your own life? Whatever it is, take action now and take the first step. It will help you to talk with a friend about what you're thinking. Share confidencecultivators.com to spread the goodness. And remember to live your values and value your life. We will see you next week on The Alignment Show.